Conversation for me focused upon work and what work means to me, how I work, and why I work so hard. My lifetime struggle with balancing work and play spoke out quite profoundly. Many good questions surfaced, but the main one about how work helps to define me is the most important one, and I will continue to engage it in the weeks and months to come. After a few days later, I sat at my dining room table watching the news and weeping. I realized that I was grieving the loss of the way of life that has been so present for me for most of my life, along with everything else related to this virus. Yes, something had died, and grief is the appropriate response. As we grieve for all of our sisters and brothers who have died, we also grieve for the death of an old way of being. Javon says that our joy and sorrow are traveling companions. Well, so is my grief and gratitude. I hold them together today, along with the prayer that we will learn whatever lessons this trying time has come to teach us, so we don't have to repeat this class again. So my wonderful friend and mentor, David White, who's a poet, and some of you know him, has this lovely poem that's called Do the First Thing First. And the poem says, do the first thing first, not the second, not the third, but the first, the thing that you don't want to do. And the first thing for me in the midst of all of this time of social distancing and just having to be extra careful was to pay attention. To pay attention to how I was feeling, to pay attention to what the messages were that were trying to come up from my unconscious so that I could catch a new glimpse of myself in some way. I think that there's so many pieces to this puzzle to be jumping the gun. It's easy to be worried and frantic and anxious and unwilling, really, of support in just stopping. It's our way of being has caused us to just think that unless you're productive, at the end of the day, when you look at yourself and you can't figure out what you have produced, you don't quite know what to think of yourself. This opportunity that has been presented to us allows us to have permission to stop. And of course, I still have work to do. You still have things to do, but those things they don't have the same kind of urgency around them, because it's really funny when you wake up with no appointments on your book and you have 3 things to do. Well, you can do them, you've got all day, you can get them all done. And if you don't get them all done today, you can do them tomorrow, because you won't have anywhere to go tomorrow either. And that to me has been something to have gratitude for. It's so funny. The paradoxes are always there. The paradoxes always are calling us to pay attention. So in the midst of this amazing, horrible pandemic, when people are dying all over the globe, we grieve about that. We grieve about the folks who can't afford to stay home because they have got to go do the jobs that make it possible for us to stay home. So the grief is real. It needs to be acknowledged. It needs to be lived into, and we need to feel it. And you know how when somebody close to you dies and you go to bed at night and you go to sleep and you wake up in the middle of the night and for a minute, you think everything's okay. And then you remember why it's not okay, because somebody died. That's part of what we have to just be willing to hold. But at the same time, we have to hold the gifts that are coming out of this. And what are those things? And so if we do the first thing first, we will stop long enough so we can do a little bit of discerning, and we can figure out what's grief and what needs to be held as gratitude. For one thing, all of us in this conversation this morning have got just such a long list of things for which to be grateful. I mean, here we all are with our computers and our high-tech selves talking to each other from all over the place, because we've got all these amazing resources, and we've got homes, and we've got the capacity to do what we need to take care of ourselves. And I'm thinking of now so much about many friends that I made over the years who live outdoors and who don't have that opportunity. I'm thinking about people like in the Native Indigenous communities and in communities where there's just no resources and people have to do the best they can. And the death rates are so much higher than among people like us because we've got the resources to protect ourselves. So all of that contributes to my left hand full of grief and then my right hand full of gratitude. My gratitude that everybody who's really close to me is well, that I'm well, because I'm 74 years old with arthritis. So I have an autoimmune issue. And so I'm a high risk candidate for this virus. So I can stay in my house. You know, I've got my sons and people to take care of me. So I hold that with great gratitude and thankfulness. So I don't know how you are progressing through this time. I don't know what the lessons are that have come to you, but if you, I'm sure you've been thinking and praying and listening. And I just want to encourage all of us to listen more deeply, to pray harder. And while we are praying, let's pray that we learn our lesson. Because even though I don't think that we serve a God who punishes us and beats us up and does bad things to us, I think that this is an opportunity that God can use, you know? I mean, maybe there's some force in the universe that meant for this to be evil and bad, and it is really bad, but God can use everything for good if we are willing to be the vessel that allows that to happen. One time I bought this beautiful card that was a highway around a very steep, on a very steep mountain. And it was not a big road, a road I would have been really glad not to drive on. But it was, the car was going on the road, and then it got to a point where if you didn't make the turn, you would just go straight off the mountain down the side. And the heading on the card said, a bend in the road is not a bad thing if you're willing to make the turn. And so the first thing first is to be willing to make the turn. You know, it's difficult to make the turn because we've got the things that we are used to that are comforting and comfortable. And we all kind of are having to watch out for our feeling that, oh, we just can't wait to get back to normal. Well, I want to say a word for, let's don't worry about normal. Let's worry about going to the next step, whatever the next step is, because I don't think that the way things were is ever coming back. I think that, and some of the way things were does not need to come back. Some of the things that we were doing, we needed to stop. You know, the earth has gotten better in these few weeks because we stopped. The atmosphere is better, pollution is less, the earth is shaking less, the seismologists say. Those are things we need to pay attention to. We need to pay more attention to those folks who are at risk and vulnerable in our communities. We need to be more worried about them. We need to be more connected to their plight in spite of our not being in the shoes that they, having to walk in the shoes that they walk on. So there are things that don't need to come back to normal, but what we need to understand that every day God gives us this new day with the energy, the understanding, the capacity to say yes to it. And we need to figure out what are the things that need to come and go so we can say yes to the day that's in front of us. I haven't been out of my house now, even outside the front door, for the last 10 or 12 days. And I was just thinking this morning that I'm just really all right with that. As busy as I was, and as much as I like to be with people and to teach and do all the stuff I do, because this is what is put in front of me right now. And whatever comes next, when it's time to go back out, when it's time to get back onto the saddle, then my prayer is that I will get on the saddle a little bit different because I have been through this experience, and that I'll be a little more conscious of the horse and not run the horse in the ground, and be willing to, to pay attention a little more carefully, because this is not an accident that this has happened. I don't believe in accidents. I think everything has some purpose and intention, and it's our job to look for that. So I want to encourage you to think about where you are right this minute, and what your thinking is, and how you're feeling, and what your hopes are for yourself and the people you care about, and for this planet, and for this church. We've learned that we can be church without having to sit in a building together. Fancy that idea. We learned that we can care about each other. We can be loving and kind, and we don't have to be getting up to go sit in a pew somewhere. And I think that's a good thing. I think we need to reimagine our ways to be together and what we're called to do in this world that so much needs us to be willing to be whatever God needs us to be. So I want to stop right there and hear your questions, and then I can say more as we get into a little deeper conversation. I can't hear you, Roger.
Okay, gotcha.
I can hear you now.
Right, excellent. Sorry about that. Can I get you, before we open up for questions, to tell us a little bit about your work with the Absalom Jones Center and what that is?
Okay.
And sort of, that's where I know your passion lies, and I want to hear a little bit about that. I know this.
Well, let me make a great commercial for the Absalom Jones Center. First of all, I want to invite all of you to go to Center for Racial Healing, which is our website, and subscribe to our newsletter. And then I want to invite you to go to if you are a Facebook person, to Absalom Jones Center for Racial Healing on Facebook, and like us, because we're trying to use this time that we're away from the office to really enhance our virtual presence. And we would love to have you follow us. I'm doing these weekly 3-minute inspirational little videos, which I've never done before. I'm just amazed at myself, what I've learned to do here in the last 3 weeks. And I just did one Tuesday that's gotten 1,300 views. And I'm the most surprised person of all that many people have watched it. But please follow, watch for them. They'll be out each Tuesday. And then I'm doing a podcast that I think the best way to keep up with all that is to follow me at Dr. Catherine Meeks, my public figure page. And that way you can keep up with what we're putting out. The Absalom Jones Center for Racial Healing morphed out of the Commission for Dismantling Racism in the Diocese of Atlanta, which I chaired for a good block of time. But for the last 8 years, the center has been open for 2.5 years, since Bishop Wright has been bishop for 8.5 years. And I was chair of the commission, and then the commission outgrew itself as a commission, and we became the Center for Racial Healing, which is a collaborative project between the Diocese of Atlanta and Bishop Michael Curry. So the center is responsible for providing assistance to the whole church for doing the work of dismantling racism. And that is a tall order, and actually probably one, if anybody had any good common sense, they wouldn't take it. But I just felt like we really followed the breadcrumbs in a way, and we just grew from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. And you know how that is. If somebody had told me 10 years ago, this is what I'd be doing, I'd say, well, really? You must be out of your mind. But if you just do step by step, do the first thing first, and the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing, before you know it, you're somewhere you never could have dreamed that you would be. So we find ourselves now 2.5 years into this work, having worked with over 60 of the dioceses in the Episcopal Church. There is nobody else in the church doing the kind of work that the center does with that kind of scope of reaching out across the whole church. And we want that reach to get even wider. We have been fortunate enough to work some in Province 9, As you may know, Province 9 includes all of our sisters and brothers in Latin America. And we've worked a little bit in Honduras with the diocese there with Bishop Lloyd Allen. And we did a wonderful International Women of Color and Wellness conference last October. And we brought women from Latin America and from Cape Coast, Ghana. And even though Ghana is not in our provinces, we have a sister relationship with the Cape Coast diocese. And so bringing those women here was really quite wonderful. One other thing that I will tell you about that I'm really excited about is the Barbara Harris Justice Project. We just had that event in November, brought Bishop Barbara to Atlanta, celebrated her life in a grand way, and opened the Barbara Harris Justice Project as a part of the center so that we could have a kind of an outreach arm for the work, because we believe very sincerely that the work has to be is inner work and outer work. And what has happened in the racial healing arena is that people think you can pick one. So you either do all the inner work, but then you don't know where you go after that, or you do all the outer work and you don't do the inner work. Neither one of those things is what has to be done. What has to be done is both. We work on our inner landscape, and we go out into the world to live out the love and healing that we have can be manifested as justice in the world out external to us. And so the Barbara Harris Justice Project will give us that kind of container so we don't get these things all mixed up. I have watched activists I've been doing this work for 50 years, and I have watched activists become burnt out and burn up and pitiful because they just went out to do the outer work and didn't do the inner work. And so it has to go together. But nobody is called to sit in your room and contemplate for a whole lifetime. Thomas Merton is a very good example of being a person who goes off and lives in silence, but comes out into the world as an activist and does a lot of different kinds of things. So the Center for Racial Healing is trying to make a case for balance and doing this work in a way that's sustainable and that can actually change things. As much energy as we have put into trying to dismantle racism in America and create an environment where everybody can live be as liberated people, and to be in the place we're in right this minute as we all sit here together, it is pitiful to think about. And I think part of the reason for that is that we have not done the work in a balanced way. We pick stuff, we think we can change something here. So we change a law, but then there's nothing to sustain it. So here we are in 2020 with people trying to keep people from voting. Nobody would have ever dreamed that we would be fighting that battle in 2020. Actually, in the 60s, as a little college kid running around being an activist, thought we'd be through talking about race by now. But here we are. And the Center for Racial Healing wants to be a catalyst for creating a new paradigm with this work. And the other big way we're trying to do that is by engaging the younger generations, because we wait way too long to start talking to people. We start talking to people who are 35 and 40 and 50, and we need to start with nursery school. And so we have built a curriculum for 6th to 12th graders, 6th graders to 12th graders. And we're getting ready to start working on the curriculum for kindergartners to 5th grade, so that we will go kindergarten through till you die, with this work. Because if we don't engage the younger folks, we just keep on teaching them the stuff that they have to get rid of and waiting until they're 40 and above to try to tell them that. And then it's a little bit late. So the center says we are an intergenerational organization. So we are working hard. Now, it's going to take us a while to make the kind of headway with that we want to. But that is our mission. That is our focus. And we're really clear about the necessity to engage the imagination of every young folks, you know, the youth and young adults. We are going to really put a lot of energy into engaging those people and everybody else. I mean, we want everybody on board here. But so you'll be sorry you asked me to talk about this, because I could talk about it for a year. I love what we do. It's we have gotten amazing affirmation from all across the country. We've gotten tremendous support from Trinity Wall Street Church in terms of trying to help us build capacity. I'm getting ready to bring a young woman on the staff as assistant director so that I can manage not to kill myself trying to do everything that's in front of me. Because for 2.5 years, I've been the kind of single mover of this work, and that's really bad stewardship. There should never be something that's just located in one person, because then, first of all, it's too much responsibility. And second of all, if something happens to that person, the work goes away. And so that's bad stewardship. So here we are. Now, I found a young woman, God sent her to me, who is really capable. She's like 30. So she's going to be able to really help with the intergenerational piece and take a lot of responsibility off of my shoulders, because I don't want to do this work till I'm 90. I don't want to work this hard. And I love to do this kind of work and to write and mentor people, but I don't really want to have to be doing everything it takes to run a center. So I just implore you to go on social media and help us out by supporting us. And if you win the lottery, send us some money.
All right. I'm going to, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I want to, we have several questions actually. But first, we have sort of a second welcome that I want to, and let folks, I have somebody who's going to thank you on behalf of a group here. So let me introduce Sue Howard. Sue Howard is on staff at Palmer and is also the president of our daughters group at Palmer. So I'm going to turn it over to Sue for a moment.
Okay. Dr. Meeks, it is such a joy for us to meet you today. We've been looking so forward to having you with us at Palmer, and the vision I think that the daughters here had has been fulfilled. Thanks to your generosity and to Rogers working on this and all the people that work together to bring us together. The daughters are going to be reading Living into God's Dream this summer in the anticipation of meeting you in person this fall. And so, any particular insights that you might have to offer as we go on that journey in anticipation to being together with you in person, we would love to hear today, as well as all the other beautiful thoughts that you offer to this community. But welcome.
Well, thank you, Sue. So I don't have any particular thoughts today, but what I would offer is, once you get into reading, I'll be glad for someone to set up a Zoom meeting where we could have a conversation.
Oh, excellent. Very good. Yeah. It's a beautiful book, and I know we'll make it available not only just for the daughters to read, but invite the congregation at Palmer also to participate as well. Couple of other questions here. Are you familiar with Houston's Center for Healing of Racism?
No.
Okay.
No.
We will find out some more information about that. That was the question.
Yeah.
And the question was, maybe you collaborate with them. So I will find out more and share that with you.
I would really appreciate that, because I'm looking for collaborative partners all over the country. I mean, This is work that all of us need to be doing. So
excellent. I will do that. This is a great question. How can we keep from returning to the bad behaviors that have damaged our earth and our relationship with each other? First part. And then how can we move forward?
Well, I think the most important way to move forward is to truly embody the present. And that might sound like not an answer, but what happens to us so much of the time is that we don't live we don't live in the moments that's in front of us. We try to live ahead of ourselves, or else we live behind ourselves. But living in the present, and it takes some intentionality to do that. So that's one thing. One of the ways to not go back to the way we were is for each of us on this screen not to go back to the way we were. Because we can't really control ourselves most of the time, and we certainly can't control anybody else. So that's the first place. And then out of that intention, organize inside the church so that there's some effort in the parish. I think that if all of our parishes could get on board doing the work that needs to be done, just think about that. Think about how powerful that would be. And so I'm an evangelist for this work has to be rooted in the parish. It's got to happen at the parish level, because people are already committed to gathering together and being on a journey together. So you don't have to start with that. I mean, we don't have to recreate the wheel every time we get ready to do something. So your church, and wherever your church is, if not everybody is from Palmer, wherever you are from, that's your first place to start. Remember, David White says, do the first thing first. The first thing is to do ourselves, to say, I'm going to live differently. I'm going to work differently. I'm going to not let my life fall back into whatever the patterns were before this opportunity to reflect upon those patterns. So that, for me, that's the way to go forward. The individual intentionality, and then the willingness to become an activist in the circles that we inhabit. You know, it's so easy to always be wondering where are the other circles that I need to be, while you kind of overlook having the impact in the circle that you're in, worrying about the circles you're not in. It's not necessary to do that. What's important is to do the first thing first. I mean, I just don't know how to say that any more powerfully than that. And because the poem is right, that is not what we want to do. We're always going to the second thing, the third thing, the fourth thing, the fifth thing. And the first thing we didn't do then inhibits the capacity for us to do the others, because it's not organic. The process is not organic. The other thing I would be so wanting to say so powerfully is, let's listen. Let's make a new commitment to listen, to see what we hear from the Holy Spirit, and not be so quick to think we know the answer. You know, I think that God's got a better understanding of what God's trying to do than we have, and that if we pay any attention to that, we can catch some glimpses of it. So collectively, we can make a commitment to listen more carefully and to act more courageously, to affirm that we did in fact learn some lessons from this horribly troubling time that we find ourselves in. And you know, the truth of the matter is, the world's been in a mess since it got started. So this is like no big surprise. It's just our mess now, and we think it's the worst mess that's ever been. But if you read the history, just a secular history, and then if you read biblical history, it's always been a mess. So I'm guessing it's going to keep on being a mess. And our challenge is to see what our role is to play in trying to help the mess be a little less than it was.
Thank you. That's fantastic. I love how you say things. The world's been in a mess. For some of you, you're having a hard time finding the chat box, and I understand that. So if there is anybody that has a question and you would like to ask that, raise your hand, and I will kind of, okay, I see one. Let me unmute you. Thad Logan.
Yeah, thank you. Hi. I tried to send this as a chat, but said that didn't work. But so this is my question. I've been, I think, thanks be to God, been lately doing pretty well with feeling grateful and in the moment. And then all of this has come up about the protesters and the people who are saying, no, we can't stay at home anymore. And I find myself so full of anger. I mean, it's like I'm just furious. And I know that I understand why I feel that way, but that's not actually helpful. Plus, it doesn't feel good. And there's got to be a better way than being caught up in that anger and that hatred and that whole deal. So I want to find my way to more compassion. And I just wondered if you had any thoughts about this whole deal.
Well, last night I sat kind of fuming at Dr. Oz and Phil McGraw and folks that were on Fox News talking about how many people die from accidents and cancer, because they're totally missing the point. And so I think the first thing you have to do is just go ahead and be as mad as hell about it. You know, that's the first step. Do the first thing first. So it's maddening, you know. So I sat for a while thinking, what's broken in these people that make them come to the conclusions that they've come into? How can you compare 60,000 people dying over a year from the flu with 30-something thousand people dying in a month? How do you make that into being the same thing? So there's something in your head and heart that's messed up. And I don't know what it is, but at least I can understand that it's not, you're not capable of thinking straight, and you certainly aren't capable of being very rational, because all of these people have died all over the globe from one thing that's happening. Do these people think that if we just act like it's not happening, that somehow will solve the problem? So if you come to that conclusion, there's something wrong with you, clearly. So I can be mad at you, which I will be, and I just own it. And then I try to understand what is the matter with you. And then I get up and go do what I've got to do, because that's all you can do. You know, I watch those folks standing on the steps in Michigan with their guns. I guess they're going to shoot the virus. Maybe that's their answer to it. Let's just all go out and shoot it, and then we can just go back to normal, you know. So we know from our own journeys how sad these folks are, because they don't have the capacity to do the inner reflection, to accept that they can't. There's some things you can't do anything about. You know, that's life. We live on this planet, and there are a whole bunch of things we can't do anything about. But people standing on the courthouse steps with an AK-47 talking about a virus don't have a clue. Really? I mean, just think about how ridiculous that is. Right? It's this, that, and the other. It is your inability to be reflective and to understand reality and to live your life like the rest of us have to, subjected to the universe. And that's sad.
So here's a follow-up to that question. Don't these people feel they have to work to eat? Aren't most of them working poor?
I don't think so. I think if you're working poor, you don't buy AK-47. You know? So those folks standing on the courthouse steps in Michigan are not the working poor. The working poor don't have time to be carrying on like that. They're busy trying to figure out how to get food. You know, so it's not the folks on Fox News are not the working poor, and the folks on Fox News don't care about the working poor. They just are spouting a political position because that's how they are, that's how they operate. Now, the folks that pick up our grocery at Kroger and are delivering stuff to us, the Amazon workers and all those folks that are still risking their lives every day, that's the working poor. The restaurant workers that don't have any way to make any money, that's the working poor. You don't see them carrying on like crazy. You know, the folks that are acting crazy, investigate them. They're not the basic majority of folks that are really struggling, trying to keep food on the table, because those people are up against no health insurance, and they're dying more than anybody else in the country from this virus. So, you know, let's just keep our own perspective clear. I think anger is fine, but you don't need to, you know, give it too many parties. I mean, you need to acknowledge it, and then you don't have to you acknowledge it, you pay attention to it, and then you tell it to go, because it's not going to get a banquet. You know, it can have a few snacks, but it doesn't get a banquet. Mm-hmm. And so, and then, because otherwise you just hurt yourself. Because, you know, my being mad at Phil McGraw, he's on Fox News. I want to break my TV. Well, if I break my TV, he doesn't care. I'm the one that's got to fix it. You know, so I just, you know, I had my reaction, and I put him up here where he belongs. And then I get up this morning and remember who I am and what I have to do today. And my job is to stand against this negative energy. That's our major job, to be interrupters of negative energy. You know, the negative stuff that comes, you look at it, you see it, you react to it, because it doesn't do you any good to pretend. If you're mad, you're mad. You know, so pretending doesn't change anything. You're still mad, you know, so you might as well just acknowledge that. But then after that, you have to figure out what you're going to do. And what I think we need to do is say, you know, my attitude's going to be different from this. I'm going to be an interrupter here for this negative stuff, just in myself and just in my house. And then with anybody that I talk to, with anything that I write, I'm going to tell the truth. I'm going to look at the whole picture, and then I'm going to find where I can stand with faith and hopefulness and compassion.
Thank you. We have just a few more minutes. Does anybody else have a question? If you want to, you can raise your hand and I will unmute you. I'm telling you, we have, okay, great. Marie.
Hi, Marie.
Yeah.
Hi. I was trying to write it all down, but it got too long and my spelling's atrocious. So thank you for letting me come in. I'm concerned about the elderly. My daughter works in a nursing home. The nursing homes seem to be tinderboxes for this virus. Yes. I'm concerned that the news is all about the ERs and the hospitals and all that, and that's important, but our elderly are important too, and I don't think we have ever taken good care of them or protected them the way we should. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that, or what we can possibly do in the future to change that.
Well, I think when we are able to be out and about again, we need to start as a community of believers, of people of faith, we need to start paying more attention to that whole issue. Right now, we have such a vacuum in terms of trying to get the truth about anything. So it's hard to know what's really going on with the elderly. But our country is on record for not caring about the vulnerable. I mean, we don't care about old folks and poor folks and children. We don't really. We care about the producers and we care about money more than anything else. So we in the church are supposed to be caring about more than that. So I think that when we are able to be back involved and out, churches need to start looking into if there's a place, an elder care place in your neighborhood or not in your neighborhood, but just that needs to get on the agenda. That needs to get on our radar screens. And I think that this virus is making us see some things that need to be on the radar screen that have not been on the radar screen. And more and more of us are getting old. And so, I mean, we got good medical care, we can eat better, we know how to take care of ourselves. So we're gonna have old folks. And we need to really interrogate, as Bell Hooks would say, interrogate ourselves about our attitude toward those that are past 65. So I have no bright ideas about what to do except to put the elderly on the agenda so that we are considering them and thinking about them. As much as we are thinking about children. We'll think about in church, we'll have all kinds of programs for children and we won't have much stuff for the old folks. Because it's always like, maybe that's our next chance, our last chance to do something. But we need to the intergenerational piece needs to be reconstructed in our culture. We used to have a lot more respect and care and appreciation for the elderly. And because we understood, part of the work that we did at the center with intergenerational things where we brought the college students together with the senior citizens, the students said that that was such a great time of healing for them, to be in the room with the seniors talking to them. So we need to really think hard about that, and how do we get that kind of cross-fertilization going again, and with folks that are not necessarily in nursing homes, but you could take young people to nursing homes and do some things. I mean, there are just a bunch of things you can do if you make up your mind that you're planning on doing it. I've worked with, I mean, not any in that particular kind of framework. I visit somebody in prison, and I've worked with folks before that have gotten out of prison. But the main thing in any of the work we do is about developing relationships and caring about people. I mean, that's all. That's what the work is. Whether it's helping somebody get a place to live, or get some food, or get some medical care, or whatever. Those are just extraneous things. The main thing is, the first thing is the relationship. So how do you maintain a relationship with anybody? You stay in touch, you care, you learn all you can about them. So if folks are just getting out of prison, they're just people like us, and they need a lot of things. So you have to figure out what you can give and how you can really be helpful. And it's important to be careful. It's always important when we're trying to help other people to interrogate ourselves and to be careful that we know why we're doing what we're doing. That we know what we're getting out of it, and we know why we want to do this, because we think sometimes we're better than we are, and sometimes we think we're worse than we are. And so we need to have a little clarity so that we can kind of see ourselves really the way we are, and being awake about what and not having a bunch of projections and stuff that you put upon people, because you're just trying to develop a relationship, and you're trying to be a brother or a sister to somebody who needs a brother or a sister. Now the particulars, like, what you give and what you don't give, is you have to work through that, and you have to be careful not to try to be a savior. So you have to be careful to let people stand on their own feet, make their own messes, let them be independent, respect them as equal human beings. Once you do all that stuff, you'll be a little busy, and that's so important, because we do so much damage trying to help the vulnerable, the people who are homeless and poor and ex-prisoners and all that. We do so much damage because we're so unconscious. And we need to, they don't need us. They don't need our projections. They don't need our mess. We need to claim our own mess and try to not dump it on them, I think, is not talking enough to people about dealing with our own hidden stuff, our own neuroses. Nobody needs your neuroses. You need to keep it for yourself. And because they've got their own, so, and you just ask yourself questions and pay attention and set boundaries and live with them, and try to the most important thing is to accept them as an equal human being, because no matter what their situation is that, Brian Stevenson says that nobody is the sum of the worst thing they've ever done. You're more than the worst thing you've ever done. And speaking of Brian Stevenson, let me encourage you to go. You can find this, I think it's on, where was I watching it? Netflix maybe, but it's an HBO documentary on Brian Stevenson. And if you can search around for it, I think I watched it on Netflix last night, but it was on HBO. You know who Brian Stevenson is, the founder of the Equal Justice Initiative? You should watch that while you're home, don't have a lot of things to do maybe. Is so amazing, as is his work. But he's just so clear about what he's doing and why, and he's such a good inspirer. So I've seen it before, and then last night I watched it again, and also the movie Just Mercy. If you haven't seen that, you want to watch that too.
Excellent. Well, thank you what a gift it has been to be with you this morning. I do want to, if Neil, if you would like to say anything, or
I just want to thank you for this time. I mean, it's not what we originally planned, but it was great to be able to have a conversation on the same day that we hope to welcome you in person. And I've often been, I appreciate what you said about being able to hold gratitude and grief at the same time, and that's okay, and to acknowledge that. And I've also really appreciated, I've quoted a lot from when I believe it was Presiding Bishop Michael Curry dedicated the center there in Atlanta. And there was a quote, I don't know when it was an offhand comment or part of his official remarks, about how we don't need to relive the past, but we do need to know what it was. So really, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Well,
so I
it's been
encourage
good to be with everybody.
Yes, definitely. I encourage you, if just one final kind of push, to check out the Center for Racial Healing's website. Be generous if you're able to make a contribution to them. They're doing amazing work. Check them out on Facebook. Again, there is a podcast as well as little videos that Catherine is doing. It's really fun to follow her and listen to her. You just got a little bit of a glimpse of the feistiness and strength and power that this woman has. And so we are excited that she'll be joining us in person, hopefully this fall. Yeah. She will also preach, which is an exciting thing. So we're looking forward to having her not only do some teaching in a setting in a classroom maybe, but also from the pulpit or from her chair up there. One last thought is that Catherine mentioned this. She has rheumatoid arthritis. And one of the things that she has said is that it has been her greatest teacher. Yeah. And that is an inspiring, hearing her talk about that. And so thank you again for being here with us today.
Well, thank you all for joining in this conversation. And I pray that you will be filled with peace and joy, and that you will find all of the ways in which you need to do the first thing first.